Hello everyone, welcome back to Naomi's Bookshelf. I am going to do my mid-month wrap-up. I have read 6 books and I am excited to talk about them. So the first book I'd like to talk about is one that I started in the middle of June and I just wasn't able to make much progress in. I literally only finished Return of the King in the second half of June, so I put up a sole book review video about that if you'd like to go watch it. I loved it, by the way. But this is one that I had started and I was just really struggling with. I finally managed to push through and I ended up really enjoying it. It's The Ivory Dagger by Patricia Wentworth. So this is a contemporary of Agatha Christie. It's a good mystery. I really enjoyed the mystery. It follows a household where this girl named Lila, she's 19, I believe. She is very naive, very young, and very much a pushover. And her aunt is forcing her into marriage with this older man who is really not a good person. He's conniving, he's very abusive in some ways, manipulative. He's not a good person. And so she is being forced into marriage with this guy. Along with it also, she has a previous fiance who she agreed to marry, and he has just woken up from a coma in the States, and he has come back to see her, and suddenly everything happens, and her current fiance, the one she's about to marry in like a week's time, is dead. He has been stabbed with an ivory dagger, and she is found standing over his body, waking up from sleepwalking with the dagger in her hand, or with her blood on her hand in her dress. It's very mysterious. It was a good mystery. I really enjoyed the different elements. Miss Silver in this, she's kind of like a Miss Marple character, if you will. And she is a really fun character to observe from. I enjoyed her character a lot more. This is the second Miss Silver book I've picked up, and I enjoyed this one way more than the other one. Now, I do have some complaints about this though. The main struggle with this one is that it really speaks of a different time. It really speaks to the idea of rape culture, and Lila is in this forced relationship essentially. She could say no, but her aunt is very forceful and doesn't care what she wants. But at the same time, what's his name? Herbert. It's been a long time reading this book. He's been dead a while since I started picking this up. But when Herbert, he is this awful person who is forcing his hugs and his kisses on Lila, and she doesn't want them, but it's sexual harassment. And it was very frustrating because he enjoyed doing that with her. He enjoyed forcing these physical attentions on her. It was very difficult to read that section. And then even after, when people are like, wait, she didn't like him? It's like, she literally would shy away from him, and her body language was so near him that it just was a little difficult to read the sexual harassment aspect. But yeah, my hair's something popping up. Anyways, yeah, it was good mystery. I'm giving it 4 out of 5. It is definitely reflective of the times, so that part did not age well, but I did think it was a good mystery overall. So the next book that I also want to talk about is one that I feel like I've also been reading for forever, and that is the Quinte Sisters by Shelley Wood. I have been reading this for about a month and a half now, and it was a buddy read with my cousin Megan. I will link her channel down below, but we were reading about 50 pages a week. It's not that crazy, but this one was a little difficult to read. This one follows the true story. It's fictionalized. It follows the true events of what happened in Ontario when these 5 little girls were born very early, and they should have died in Ontario. And they were born to French Catholic parents, and the government definitely played a role. So this is an actual true event, like I said. These 5 girls actually grew up in this environment where they were taken from their parents right away. Their parents had no guardianship over them for several years until their father had a guardianship aspect, but he was one of 5 guardians over them. And they were put in these situations where they were basically lab rats for part of the time, or they would play in playgrounds where there's one-way mirrors so people would watch them. They were like zoo animals. This is a thing that happened, and they only received money that they were supposedly earning for themselves, like in 2000, I think it was. I have not done a mass amount of research on this, but it was interesting. I found it to be a little difficult to read. Well, I guess speaking from my position as a childcare provider, some of the things that they were doing were so wrong. And sometimes it's like that's a reflection of the time when these girls are being raised, but this is also a reflection of those doctors who were involved. And at the same time, I am a little concerned about the representation in this, because these people are real. There are still 2 of the quintuplets alive, maybe 3. I think there might be 3. Anyways, at least 2 of them are still alive. And then there are family members who are still alive and direct descendants who are still alive of these people that were talked about. This book followed an unnamed nurse, or a nurse who did not exist, and her journal entries of what happened as she was there at the beginning of the birth all the way through. I'm glad they didn't take a real person. I'm glad Shelley didn't take a real person and then just do that, like follow the real person but make up journal entries. But there were several things in this that I didn't appreciate. The first of which was how the parents were constantly referred to. The father was constantly referred to in a creepy way, and then the mother was always referred to as fat, overweight, lazy. It was just really annoying. She did have 13 children, so you know, she was tired, and weight has nothing to do with that. So I don't know why it was just such a negative thing about this book. It was such a prominent aspect of her character. I couldn't tell you much more about her aside from the fact that she's bitter and she was fat. And that's not a good character development in my opinion. And she's a real person. Like, her children are still alive. So that was something else. I don't want to say too much without spoiling the whole book, but there is a huge trigger warning for the end. I'm going to say the trigger warning if you would like to be warned. If not, you can skip until I'm done until this book is put down. So I'm going to spoil it now. There's a strong trigger warning for rape in here, and it was quite a random, sudden thing. And then it was like not talked about, but it was very prevalent right away when it showed up, and it was like towards the end. So just a warning, if you are worried about trigger warnings, rape is definitely a thing in this. I should say that I'm giving this one, I think, a 2 out of 5. I was debating a 3, but in the end, the true people being represented in a way that I don't think was respectful or potentially proper, I give it a 2. The next book that I want to talk about is something I really loved. It's a reread. I was just flying through it. I read it while camping. It was great. The Unhoneymooners by Christina Lauren. I think this might be my all-time favorite romance ever, aside from like Christian romance, because I just eat those up like candy. But this one was so good. I love the hate to love and enemies to friends to whatever. I love the miscommunication, but not. That's one thing I noticed while rereading this book is like my biggest trope that I hate in books is when people don't talk and they spend the entire book not talking. And this one, when they didn't talk, they had a reason. And then they did talk. I thought it was so wonderful. 5 stars. I just love this book. If you haven't heard about this book, I will tell you the quick summary. It's about Olive and Ethan as they go on a honeymoon when they were the best man and the maid of honor at their siblings' wedding because everyone else got sick and the honeymoon was gonna go to waste. So they end up going on a honeymoon and they hate each other at the beginning. And it's great. I think this is such a funny book. It's definitely rereadable and it's just so fast and fun. Love it. The next one was one that I had really wanted to read as well. That was like, I was in a romancy kind of mood. And so I picked up Beach Read by Emily Henry. This was such a great one too. I'm giving it 4 stars. For some reason, I love reading romance, but I don't like reading sex scenes. And this kind of had a few extra ones that I was like, I'll just skip those. But otherwise, I loved this. It follows January and Augustus as they are both writers and having writer's block, and they live next door to each other as January just moved in, and then they try to coexist in the same small town, and then they end up challenging each other to writing the other person's genre. And it's just, I think it's so much fun. It definitely explored literary fiction aspects, which I love literary fiction too, and it explored the romance aspect, or the chick lit aspect, if you will. It also really had development of characters. I thought that everyone had a reason for what they were doing, and I loved that. I also really loved the fact that Augustus, I think, had migraines, and it wasn't blatantly stated because we're in January's head the whole time, but he talks about having headaches, and then later on there's just a perfect quote I found that I love, and I think it's my new favorite quote of all time. It was just so wonderful, and I think that this book is really great. I skipped over the sex scenes, but I think everything else about this was amazing. I highly recommend it. I understand why everyone's loving it. It was just so much fun, but also so heartbreaking at points, and it worked. It worked. The next book was Fragility by DiAngelo, and this was a book all about race. I was reading it through June, and I listened to the audio, and it took me some time to mull over. I was reading sections and I'd think about them, and I'd read a new section, I'd think about it. It definitely made me think about things in this world a lot more. It opened my eyes to some things, and it really was thought-provoking at the very least. I highly recommend reading this. It didn't have everything for me, but it definitely had value for me. Even if it was just me questioning how I respond to things, or my internal bias, things like that, where I try, but I didn't realize some other things as well. So anyways, it was a little bit of a chunky read. It's a small book, but it like deep material, and it made me have to take a while to just embrace it and like really think and mull over it, but I highly recommend it. I decided on 5 stars for White Fragility. It definitely made me think. It definitely made me evaluate certain aspects in my life or in my culture, and I was happy for the experience in spite of the tough material. So my last book that I'm going to discuss in this video is the most recent book that I finished, and that would be Pride and Prejudice. I ended up reading it in this edition, not my other pink edition. This one was so much fun to read. I just put out a video about why I think Charlotte Lucas made a great choice in her marriage to Mr. Collins, so if you want to check that out, you can. But this is such a fun one. I really enjoyed reading this again, but the funny thing about it is like new things kept popping up in my world where it was like, oh, didn't recognize that before, or I knew things, and then it was something like, wow, Lizzie is really judgmental, like really critical of everybody. And I mean, like, I knew it, but then it was also really prevalent. And so when she was cut to her knees with her judgments, and I was like, all right, you deserve it, but you're gonna pick yourself up and like move on and learn from this experience. And I also really loved Mr. and Mrs. Gardner, especially Mrs. Gardner. She's such a fun lady. She was in for so little, but she was so great. She was clearly maybe 10 years older than Lizzie, and truly a great mother role model for her. I also really enjoyed all of the ball scenes, all of the characters. I feel like Mary and Kitty get the short end of the stick a lot of the time in this book. But hey, you can't have everyone be the main character. So anyways, I love this one. I'm giving it 5 stars every time. But I will say, despite how controversial it is, this is not my favorite Jane Austen book. It's not up there. I think my favorite might be is Persuasion, and then maybe Mansfield Park or Sense Sensibility. It's a little different. This is not my top 3, but I still love Jane Austen. I love Pride and Prejudice. So these are the 6 books that I read so far. I have read so far in the month of July. I hope I get a lot more done with the reading rush, or with the rest of my books for Jane Austen July, or the Shakespeare read along. I'm working my way through a few of them at the moment as well, but I feel like I'm making progress, so that's always a good thing. Please like this video if you liked it, and subscribe if you would like to for more content from me. I will see you next time with another video. Bye for now.